with everyone. We toured with the Posies. We toured with Cake. We toured with Sunny Day Real Estate. Sunny Day Real Estate took our bass player.
Oh, yeah.
We toured with Alex Chilton, Robin Hitchcock.
Yeah.
We played with the Jayhawks in front of 10 people in their hometown of Minneapolis in 1990. Red House Painters, Lisa Loeb, Thinking Fillers Union, played festivals with Vampire Weekend before they were big, and TV on the radio. I mean, Southern Culture on the Skids, Mike Watt. I mean, we just ended up touring with everybody that would take a pop band during grunge.
Yeah, right.
You know?
Well, Adam sent me a mug that says we've played thousands of shows to hundreds of people.
I love that. That's a great point. But the thing is, you can't, it's like with everything else. You don't want just, 5 servings of steak. You need the variety. So when you go see a show, you want to have those other bands in there and hear other things other than, and to the discredit of that style is like, a lot of bands got signed that shouldn't have because they were quote unquote grunge. And it's just like, here you guys are doing your thing and got overlooked.
So Tony, I'm hoping at some point during this conversation, you will pause, you will insert examples of.
We're going to have music underneath. Yeah.
Well,
for sure.
I think we should maybe even take a break but you're producing. I will stop now.
I'm open to suggestions.
But going back to the original. So the band forms in Brooklyn, right? This is mid '80s. What clubs are you playing? Like, where are you? Tell us the formation here.
So we were underage, and we all met at CB's, and Hilly Crystal, who ran CB's, introduced everyone, and he said, you need to meet this band, and we all love Campervan, and we knew that there were a lot of bills we couldn't play on. I loved Twisted Galore, which was John Spencer's first band, but we would never play. We ended up playing with them once. It was very strange. We always knew that we weren't going to be popular, and we always knew that right. It's just, you kind of know, and like
we're too straight for this. Like we're like conventional.
But you kept you kept your direction regardless, because you're.
Yeah, I love that. It's like. You're dating and you just know you're not going to date Giselle. Like it's not, and so that knowledge kind of kept us together and humble. And what we ended up getting were along the way, friends that love and just are lifers. We call them lifers. And they literally had the big record collections, and we would sleep over, and it wasn't like sleep over and leave the next morning. We would wake up in the morning still talking about music. Like I think I would fall asleep with my eyes, like my eyes would close and I was still talking about Todd Rundgren records. And we would wake up and miss the next show because we're having so much fun with these people in these towns that it's a community thing, and that's what kept us going. And we felt like we belonged to a larger thing. It wasn't just grunge or something, but it was like just good music people. And it was literally one at a time. It was one at a time.
So are you starting with whatever the Monday night 2 a.m. slot at CB's audition night, or like is
Yeah.
Are you on Bleecker Street handing out flyers in front of Kenny's Castaways? Yeah.
So we auditioned for Dorf at Knitting Factory.
Knitting Factory, yeah.
It was like Tuesday, and we went on stage and played a song.
He doesn't remember you. You're not doing City Winery now.
It's a long time ago, but he's like, I think you should open for Yola Tango, and you had to audition, and so Hilly was great, and we were underage, so we helped him invent the Sunday matinee. So it was like Sunday at 3, and they shut the bar. They just put tape over the bar, and all these kids would pay whatever just to get in.
Yeah, that's what people forget, that people just think of as the hardcore matinee, but it wasn't always the hardcore matinee.
No, there was ska, and, the Toasters, and bands like the Specials, and there was pop, and a lot of ska was really great pop, and Joe Jackson's influence, when palatable, was the good ska for me, not just the pick it up dance, but his version, like Beat Crazy, is a great record. So we just always were hungry for pop and bands that understood how to write a song. And the 90s were really tough. It was very scream, masculine, Middle Apes were gone, you know, and the things that the Beatles set in motion with ELO, XTC, you know, all that whole progression stopped for a while.
Yeah.
Neil Young became the Godfather, but it was his attitude, not his songwriting necessarily.
Yeah, agreed.
You know, and the 90s got weird. I have very few records from the 90s, but I have a slew from the 70s and 80s and past the 90s. So
like the whole indie, I mean, like the Feelies are like one of the bands that kept on it through the 80s. And then you got there was the Sub Pop, and that was kind of, I was thinking about it as a mashup between punk and metal is kind of what happened, and it was sort of got noisier. And then you got the Sonic Youth pieces you're talking about, but the songcraft kind of went away. And then, you know, the embrace of lo-fi as like there was the people who did it to do, you know, I'm making these 4 tracks of great songs that became, you know, what is the Elephant Six like that?
I was just going to mention like Neutral Milk Hotel and,
and there's,
you know, the Clans and people,
because that's my first experience with the 4 tracks were friends and bands. That's how they'd make their demos that became, you know, and you would pass it around and trade them, but it became sort of a production style more than after a while, and you would get.
I love lo-fi. I love 4-track recordings because while the big bands were getting the budgets to do grunge, and before that hair metal, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
The songwriters were going, screw that. Give me the 4-track. A good song's a good song. So you had Guided by Voices, and you had Sebado, and you had classic records in the spirit of almost Get Happy by Elvis Costello, which felt like B-sides, like Trust, some of Trust and a lot of Get Happy, Taking Liberties, which feel like, who cares what it sounds like? Great songs, you know? That's why I loved about the 4-track generation, because it was quality over quality. And and they still, all those songs are great. So whereas the grunge bands had Ocean Way booked for 6 months, and you know, like whatever, it was the commerce at the time, you know.
Yeah, and that's where I mean, I don't want to jump ahead in the story too quickly, but that's where DGC Geffen was kind of the place where those, and I think of sort of the Todd Rundgren XTC records, you know, record as like that. They were making these productions that. Like they got, they would argue that their budgets weren't that big, but they certainly were bigger than what an indie label was putting out. You know, and you know, because I mean, Yola Tango, they would alter between both worlds, where they would be kind of poppy and then they would be noisy and embrace the Neil Young thing. But that's where your records really sound great, like the ones you released yourself, because you ended up pretty quickly on the label Simple Machines, though, right? Like,
great label.
Yeah,
you know, when we did our one record with them, we had done singles, and David Grohl in Nirvana, it was either pre-Nirvana or post-Nirvana, where he had demos, because he's from DC and he had all these demos, and he gave him the Simple Machines to put out. And so we had a cassette and he had a cassette, and they were just making David Grohl cassettes in their basement. That was how he got that music out. But they were great. I mean, there's a lot of great bands that are lost. Lungfish and Nations of Ulysses and all these bands are just, nobody knows about them. You could literally have a 2-hour expose on all those DC bands. And I love DC because New York was grungy and street, and, you know, Suicide was playing, and everything had claws. And DC was all political and smart. And everybody was singing about the world. It was like 19-year-olds rocking out about world politics and Fugazi, and, you know, it's like Teen Beat and Mark and Unrest, and, you know, it was Bad Brains, and they had a scene. So we were going down there because we were like, these guys are doing something really cool. Not just, you know.
I went to school at George Washington down there at the time. So like the 930 Club, and it was kind of like that's why I saw Run DMC at the you know, and I saw like the Replacements a bunch of times there, but Ian MacKaye, to make money, was he would work with IMP, Seth Horowitz, who owned was co-owner of 930 Club. He would promote shows at our school, and I was on the concert committee. So Ian MacKaye was the crew lead. So he would sit and like talk about how you shouldn't eat Oreos because the filling has animal fat in it, and you know it's made from and how it was like such an education without being pompous or at all. It was just like this really smart guy just giving you knowledge. It was pretty cool.
So since then, I feel like we've embraced selling out. Like, yeah. Does Kellogg's want my song? Go for it. You know, does the Army want my song while people are running? You know, like back then, like now, when we want to stop doing something bad, like that sugar substitute, there was the cornstarch sugar substitute. People freak out. It's like. Ian was doing that with music. Yeah. So he was like alerting people to use their brains and rocking out. All these kids with their pants were cut and tats and dyed hair, not knowing what to do with their energy. And he was like, follow me, you know? And that was the cool thing about, DC Space. The other thing also was, now everything has analytics tied to it. If you play a show, they want to see your paperwork from the last show to see how many you bring. Nobody cares about vibe and like.
How many likes do you have?
Back then it was like, let's make an event and let's have some labels involved and tastemakers and let's make this something I'd want to go see. Instead of just what are your analytics? Because when it's about analytics, just put on the Neil Diamond cover band. Yeah.
It goes back to the why have a live band? You're gonna have a DJ that will play the actual records by the actual original artists. You know, it's like where's the magic there? So is this your first record on Simple Machines?
The first record was on Fang Records, which was like a local New York record label with a guy from Bethesda. So that was a DC contact. And the second one was Simple Machines. And then the third one was Dromedary, which was a Jersey label called Flying Suit. And then the fourth one was with Peter Cadis' label. Peter Cadis produced the National, Interpol, Sting, Fish. Like he's become one of the biggest indie producers. He really does not do the LA thing. He's still in Connecticut. And, at any given time, he has like the National over doing their next record or Guster. And we were in with the Guster scene, so he had his own label, and that was our fourth record called Bingham's Hole. And then we moved to we were in California, and then the Geffen record, and then that was just 5 records. And
there's this constant momentum forward with the band, right? So it's like you actually it's almost happening too quickly, or too perfectly. It seems like you go from singles, you're on a couple cool labels, you don't seem to ever be wanting to get more music out, right? And that there's always a place to do it. So what triggers is just the logical step of the music industry, the next step up is on the West Coast, and that's where you gotta go to do this? Well,
New York, CB's was great, but there was no place to play. It was like Tramps and CB's, and it was not a viable thing. So there was not enough places to play, and I know San Francisco had a really kind of thriving scene, and it was still cheap. And so Camper was out there, and we loved that scene, and there was Game Theory, like great, there was the Paisley Underground that we didn't have here. That was not how, it was in LA. Like, how did that happen there? So, so we went to California, and it was awesome. It was easy living. And then, and there was like, you just keep touring. And back in the 90s, the whole thing was to get a manager, get signed, and then either make it or not. And so we just got on the bandwagon. The problem is we knew we were never going to be popular. We knew, and then we got signed to Geffen and had 2 A&R guys. One had Peter Gabriel, Amy Mann, and Counting Crows, and the other one had Guns N' Roses and Weezer and Whiskey Town, and just like, we would say to them, we are not going to be that, don't count on us to be successful.
It's like talking them out of it.
It's like, you guys know it was a mistake to sign us.
Like, are you sure? Like, I would go, so I never got the Counting Crows. I never understood it, okay? I love Van Morrison, but I never got them. And I know they're great. I just never got it. And I would go to shows with their A&R guy, and people were freaking out. Yeah. Like throwing clothes on the stage, like literally like pulling their clothes off. And I'd lean over to the A&R guy and I go, do you get this? Because he was a musician. He played with Bob Dylan. And he whispered in my ear, "Go, don't tell anyone, but I'm just, it's keeping my job, like afloat." And so constantly I was like,